Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the First Lady.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to this celebration, because that's indeed what it is. And we are especially pleased that today we have so many members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, who have worked together on this issue. We are pleased that we have officials from the prior Republican administrations who are here with us, who have cared about this issue. I am delighted that Thomas Glenn, the Deputy Secretary of Labor, and Madeline Kunin, Governor Kunin, the Deputy Secretary of Education, are also here and having labored on this issue. Governor McKernan of Maine, and I thought maybe another governor or two were here as well. We are delighted to have the business community represented by the leaders of major United States corporations, medium-sized businesses, and small businesses who recognize the importance of what we are doing today. Also, officials of organized labor who have been in the forefront of requiring training and apprenticeship programs for workers who understand the importance of extending that to more and more of our American workforce. The School to Work Association leaders and the School to Work business leaders, education leaders, and representatives of foundations, and so many of you who as citizens have realized the importance of this issue for a number of years. I want to pay special tribute to two organizations and two reports that really broke new ground. The first was a report by the Grant Commission called The Forgotten Half, which I was privileged to work on years ago, back in 1985, 86, 87, which recognized for the first time that at least half of our young people were not being given the support and help they needed to make the transition from education to the world of work, but that in fact we were taking care of and subsidizing publicly and privately those young people who went on to colleges, and particularly who graduated from four-year colleges, but were ignoring at our peril the many good, decent, hardworking young Americans who did not have a four-year college education. And then a second report by the National Center on Education and the Economy, which pointed out that America faced a choice, high skills or low wages, and which laid out in brilliant analysis what that choice meant and how we could better organize our educational and workforce opportunities to extend the American dream to every young American. So we are especially pleased to see so many who have worked on this issue gathered today for this incredibly important event. It would never have been possible without two secretaries of Labor and Education who realized that the old ways of categorical programs and dividing the policies between their departments and drawing all kinds of lines that prevented collegial cooperation should be over. And instead, they have worked together, their staffs have worked together, and they have enabled this day to come about because they were willing to think differently, to put people first, and to solve real problems that real Americans face every day. And it is my pleasure to introduce the Secretary of Education, Dick Riley.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Hillary, and it's good to be back. I just got in late last night from Anaheim, California, where I had the pleasure of addressing the AARP Biennial Convention. And I say to these young people behind me and all of you that are interested in intergenerational interests, that the older Americans are so interested in these young people and so interested in education and what they can do to serve and help. And I think we have a great future in bringing all of the generations together. And I want to thank Hillary and say to you as Secretary of Education that I'm so pleased to be in this historic place for this historic bill signing, and these young people are part of this historic event and can always think about that as they grow. This is a fitting sequel to the bill signing we had a month ago in San Diego when President Clinton signed into law Goals 2000, Educate America Act. That comprehensive law created a system of world-class learning standards for all children. We call that day the day that America really got serious about education. Today's enactment of the School to Work Opportunities Act is evidence of this seriousness put into practice. It's part of the framework of educational excellence that Goals 2000 establishes and encourages. There's evidence here on the White House lawn by these wonderful projects formulated and built by these creative young students. School to Work provides students with real skills and expertise that can be applied to daily life and to work, to offer innovation and inspiration in education, creative ways to apply what is taught, and a welcome change from the old assembly line vision of education. These programs turn dreary classrooms into places where learning is enjoyable yet challenging with the same high standards. They are the kinds of educational programs that all parents want for their children. What is most exciting about School to Work is that it offers our young people college and careers, not one or the other. It's not only lowers the number of students who drop out of high school, certainly, it also increases the number who go on to college, and it provides them with a firm foundation of a lifetime of learning. I'm so pleased that we've achieved this education milestone, and I'm equally pleased that we have achieved it by virtue of an innovative partnership between the Department of Education and the Department of Labor that Hillary referred to. A partnership that is emblematic of the cooperation of President Clinton's cabinet, putting progress ahead of programs, putting ideas ahead of turf. And I can think of no one who better symbolizes this spirit of cooperation than the person with whom I have had the great pleasure of working with over the last year, a man who has really re-energized the Department of Labor, who's brought new ideas to our nation and helped then put them into practice. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me, straight from his appearance last night on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, Secretary Bob Wright.
Well, thank you, Secretary Riley. We've always considered you the Jay Leno of the cabinet, and I think that it's appropriate that you gave me that introduction. Actually, I want to start by saying what an absolute privilege and pleasure it has been to work with Secretary of Education Dick Riley. He is not only a leader in education, he's a leader generally in so many areas, and we have, because of his leadership, managed to break down that barrier. There is no real barrier. There should not be a barrier between education and work. These days, you can't separate and should not be able to even try to separate education from work. We're talking about a new economy in which lifelong learning is a necessity. for every single member of the American workforce. And although we've had tremendous success over the past 15 months creating new jobs, in fact, we are fully in a jobs recovery, 2.5 million new jobs, we still have a continuing problem in this country in terms of a division between those with skills and those without skills in terms of what they are actually earning. That earnings gap, that skills gap, is growing. It's been growing for 15 years. And we are determined to do something about it. It's not just a matter of the number of jobs, it's the quality of the jobs for all Americans. A college degree should not be that parchment that divides the winners from the losers in our society. And we cannot afford, as a society, to move in a direction where there is a growing split in the ranks of the American workforce. The Commerce Department, about 3 weeks ago, came out with a very chilling statistic. I don't know how many of you saw it. 18% of full-time workers are not earning enough to keep a family of 4 out of poverty. And that's up from 12% in 1979. Long-term trend. It has to do with the fact that skills are so much more important than they've ever been. The demand is shifting in favor of skilled people against people without skills. Technology is driving it. And that's why we in this country, it is so important that we develop a lifetime learning system. And that's why the President's leadership on lifetime learning is so critical at this juncture. Goals 2000, the School to Work Opportunity Act, the Reemployment Act that we hope to have in place, these are critical pieces for the American public, for American workers, for our future and our children's future. This is an amazing coalition that came together over School to Work and School to Work opportunities. We had 300 Democratic, 93 Republican votes in the House. This overcomes all mythology about gridlock. This is people joining together, bipartisan joining together. Corporate CEOs like Albert Hauser of Siemens USA, Roger Ballou of American Express Travel. A lot of CEOs are in the audience today. The American business community is committed to school to work opportunities. 3 former secretaries of labor are here. John Dunlop, Ray Marshall, Elizabeth Dole, and again, this represents their commitment over many years to this kind of enterprise. 6 union presidents, including John Sweeney, Keith Geiger, many others are here. Civil rights leaders, Jesse Jackson, Ben Chavis, educators like Juanetta Cole, Donald Stewart, the governor of Maine, Jock McKiernan, former governor of Vermont, of course, Madeleine Kunin, some 50 members of Congress from both parties. I want to make a special mention, and it's hard to make special mention, but I do want to make special mention of 2 individuals. House Chairman Bill Ford, extraordinarily forceful and effective on the House side, making this happen, and I want to just show and express my appreciation for that. And I want to make a special mention of Senator Ted Kennedy, because here is a man whose commitment to the working people of America, the working men and women of America, is absolutely unparalleled. This act is not just about changing institutions and changing the way Washington does work. It's about changing people's lives. It's not about us. It's about kids. It's about these young people back here. And I want to introduce one young man named Chris Brady. And Chris is from Boston, a wonderful place. Chris has been going through a program that is really a model, one of the models on which we base this entire program, Project ProTech. I'm going to ask Chris to tell his story to you. And Chris, let me invite you up now.
Thank you, Secretary Rice. Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Riley. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Chris Brady. I'm a senior at Boston High School in Boston, Massachusetts. It's an honor to be here. I lived my entire life in Boston. My father worked as a meat cutter, and my mother worked in a hospital. This is my first time ever being to Washington, and I've noticed something very strange here. everybody except for Ted Kennedy and myself speaks with a funny accent. It's an honor to be here because I'm about to graduate from high school, which a few years ago I never planned on doing. And in the fall, I plan to attend a business college, a 2-year business college. And I never thought I'd ever do that. I thought school was a waste of time. I didn't like it, so I hardly ever went. Instead, I worked nights cleaning office buildings in Quincy. And I spent my days looking for a second job so I could help pay the rent for me and my mother. This was difficult because the only jobs I could find were bagging groceries and sweeping floors. These jobs paid barely enough to buy groceries, let alone pay the rent. In the jobs with decent pay, I wasn't qualified for. I was 16 and I had no clue to my next move. I transferred to a work-study program at Boston High School. But at first it didn't work and I dropped out. But then I saw what my friends who had dropped out were doing, like stocking grocery shelves. And I knew I wanted something more for myself. So I went back to school. That year, I learned about a school-to-work program called ProTech. ProTech matches public school students with healthcare and financial services companies in Boston. That was interesting to me because I've always been interested in business. And I knew I wouldn't get a job unless I had enough qualifications. So I had applied to ProTech, and I was accepted. And then last September, I started ProTech as a student. This meant making major changes in my school and work life. I had to give up my night job and switch my classes to the afternoon. ProTech assigned me to work at Fleet Financial Group in Boston, one of the country's largest financial institutions. For 4 months, I learned the basics of banking and what work was all about. In February, I started working part-time in the large currency department at Fleet. My job is to monitor cash transactions over $10,000 and report them to the IRS. I've got to pay close attention to detail, talk to branches over the phone, and use my computer to enter data and find information. Best of all, I started to see the connection between work and school. My classes are set up to coincide with my job. For example, in my computer business class, I've learned about word processing, database, and spreadsheets. Until today, my attendance has been perfect. I haven't missed a single day of school. My grades have improved too. For the first time ever, I've actually liked going to school. I'll graduate this year and have been accepted to Newberry College, a 2-year college close to my home. I'll be the first person in my family to attend college. If it hadn't been for Boston High and ProTech, I'd probably be stuck in a dead-end job if I had a job at all. I'm just learning about these things, but they tell me we're making history today. For that, Mr. President, I thank you. Not for myself. Not for myself, but for thousands and thousands of young people who will benefit from your support of the School to Work bill. I hope this legislation helps students across the country understand that school and work are connected, so they don't have to learn the hard way like myself. And now, before introducing you, I have one question, Mr. President. Could you write me a pass to excuse me from classes today? And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the President of the United States.
Hey, Chris. Just go on and sit in my seat. If you keep talking like that, you'll occupy it someday anyway. Sit down. The, my goodness, he was good. You know, all of us, I think, carry around inside progressive impulses and conservative impulses that send us different messages from time to time. And one of the conservative impulses that has been honed in me over time is always be careful what you do because of the law of unintended consequences. Well, when I think of the enormous bipartisan support this legislation has had, it didn't seem to me that there could possibly be any adverse unintended consequences. But do you realize what Chris Brady has done today by telling us what he does? Do you have any idea how many criminals all over the world have always wondered who monitored those $10,000 transfers for the IRS? Well, what the heck, it was worth it to get the bill and to meet him. You know, when a president signs a bill into law, normally he just needs the bill, a pen, and a desk. And ordinarily, the bill and the pen get the top billing. He signs the bill, hands out the pens. Today, we're going to try to give the desk a little higher billing. It's no ordinary desk, and its presence here today, as much as any speech or ceremony, symbolizes what this bill is all about. Last month, Janet Swinson gave her students at the Manufacturing Technology Project in Flint, Michigan, an assignment. Suppose the president wanted you to design a desk and build it to use at a White House ceremony. It couldn't look like a typical desk. It had to be inexpensive. It had to be easy to move and reassemble. Well, within an hour, 8 of her students had formed a project team, drawn up rough blueprints, and even called a supplier to check on the availability of materials. Then they went to work. They drew on their knowledge of geometry and applied math to tinker with the blueprints. They negotiated with the vendors and bought the proper supplies. They built the desk at their center in Flint, Michigan. Then they broke it down, packed it up, and brought it with them to Washington. Yesterday, with a few Allen wrenches, they put it back together again here on the White House lawn, and here it is. This is a custom-made piece of furniture, developed, designed, built, delivered, and assembled by 8 young people, none of whom is older than 20 years of age. I'd like to ask them to stand along with their teacher. Where are they? Stand up. Here they are, these 8. Give them a hand. This bill is not the end of a journey. It's not a problem that has been solved. Instead, it's a whole new approach to work and learning. Hillary and I were talking up here as we looked out across this vast sea of faces of those of you whom we have known and worked with for so many years on this issue. I was thinking about how many nights I have talked to Bob Reich about this subject over the last 10 years, long before he ever dreamed he'd be Secretary of Labor, and certainly before even his fertile imagination could have figured out how I might be able to appoint him someday. The whole time I served as governor of my state, I kept in my office a little silver box that Dick Riley gave me way back in 1979, the first time I went to South Carolina to meet with him and talk with him. I see in this audience a sea of faces of people with whom there is some story, some connection about this great endeavor on which we are embarked. The last major initiative I supported as the governor of my state before I began campaigning for president was one designed to create a school-to-work network and a higher quality of training for young people who didn't go on to 4-year institutions of higher education and ultimately to degrees. This is the work, my fellow Americans, that we will have to continue for a lifetime. If you want to keep the American dream alive, we must not only create more jobs, We have to make it possible for people who work hard and do the right thing to become members of our middle-class society. You heard Hillary mention the Grant Commission report way back in '87 about the forgotten half, the young people who don't go on to further education and training, or the Carnegie report, America's Choice, high skills and low wages. These are things that she and I and all of our people for years talked about because we knew the people personally who were affected by it. If you're fortunate enough to represent people from a small state like me or Senator Mitchell, who never comes to the White House without at least one person from Maine, I've now met half the population, Governor, thanks to his coming here. You actually know people who work harder every year for lower wages. You know people who lose their jobs and then they can never get a job that good again. You see what's happened in stark terms to people whom Senator Regal represents in the automobile industry. There are millions of people like that everywhere. And so I want to begin just by thanking the members of Congress who put aside partisanship and regionalism and everything else to pass this bill. And they have already been acknowledged, the leaders have, by Secretary Rice, but let me just acknowledge the people who played a major role in the various committees whose names I now have. In addition to Chairman Ford, the minority leader of that committee, Congressman Bill Goodling, Congressman Dale Kildee, Congressman Steve Gunderson. On the Senate side, in addition to Chairman Kennedy and Senator Mitchell, Senator Durenberger, Senator Jeffords, Senator Metzenbaum, Senator Pell, Senator Simons, Senator Wofford, Senator Hatfield, and I know Senator Ford, Senator Regal are here, but there are a slew of members of Congress here whose names I don't have, but I want you to see the depth of support this bill has. So I'd like to ask every member of Congress here present to stand so the rest of you can see how much they cared about this. We have probably more than 10% of the entire Congress here today. I thank Secretary Riley, and I'm glad that Secretary Rice could tear himself away from Jay Leno long enough to show up today. He was funny last night, did you see it? Probably wants a raise today. He needs further training before we do that. I want to thank the people from business and labor and education and community activists, all of you who are here. And most important, I want to honor the young men and women who are now seizing the opportunity provided by existing programs to make sure they don't become part of America's forgotten half. Each of the young people who are here today will receive a certificate, but I think we ought to give them another hand and say we're pulling for their future. Creating this national network of school-to-work programs is our common attempt to address perhaps the greatest challenge of our times for Americans. How to make the dramatic economic changes occurring all over the world work for our own people. How to put their interests first and reward their efforts and give life to their aspirations. We can revive our economy, we can bring the deficit down, increase investment, create jobs. We can expand trade, we can do all these things. But if we don't give our own people the chance to reap the rewards of economic progress, we will have failed. The last 2 decades have been especially hard on the working people of America. All of you know that. Especially on the 75% of our people who don't actually finish getting a 4-year college degree. We're now in a global economy where, to use my buzz phrase, what you earn depends on what you can learn, not even what you know. We now see that we passed a decade in the 80s where the gap between the wages of college graduates and high school graduates literally doubled because of global economic forces. For too long, we were the only country that did not have a system to provide this sort of education and training and opportunity for young people who don't go on to 4-year colleges. Oh, a lot of people were doing a great job of it, and interestingly enough, as so often happens, the people were way ahead of the system, and you can see that in the explosion of enrollments in high-quality two-year programs all around the country, and more high schools trying to come to grips with their responsibilities to train young people who weren't going to college. But we didn't have a way of providing these opportunities to all of our people. The legislation that I will sign is both innovative in structure and ambitious in scope. It doesn't simply throw a lot of new money or create a lot of new bureaucracy. Instead, it enables us in the national government to be a catalyst, to bring together workers and businesses, parents and students, the experts and the doers, the designers and the implementers, to create programs that work for every American and every community in this country. It will provide development grants for each state to plan comprehensive training and education and apprenticeship systems. And it will do what I think we ought to do. It will set national standards for what these programs must accomplish. Grassroots reforms, national standards. The federal government's not very good at regulating or operating things like this, but we can know through readily available information what standards all programs ought to meet. And then we can empower people at the grassroots level to decide how they can most easily meet those standards. That's the sort of reinventing government the Vice President is always talking about and working on. It's a small seed that will give us quickly, I predict to you, a national network of school-to-work programs. In the years to come, our young people will be able to know with confidence that their learning will not end when they leave high school, but they won't leave high school without enough learning to go on to further training and to be productive citizens. This new law, as important as it is a part of a larger piece. Just a few weeks ago, I signed the Goals 2000 legislation, and a lot of you worked hard on that, setting national performance standards for the first time for our schools, and again, supporting grassroots reforms to achieve those standards. Now we're working cooperatively, again in a bipartisan spirit with Congress, to refine and to enact the last significant piece of this lifetime learning agenda, the Reemployment Act, that will change the unemployment system to a reemployment system in recognition of the fact that most people don't get called back to their old jobs when they are on unemployment. The average worker will now change jobs 7 times in a lifetime, and in a workplace where ROMs and RAMs and robotics are the rage, there will never ever be a time again when our workers won't need to learn something new. The Reemployment Act will therefore complement this School to Work Act and the Goals 2000 bill. And as the American people, with all their energy and ingenuity and ability, implement them, it will be a lasting tribute to those of you from all corners of America and all walks of life and both political parties who have known for many years that this was the thing we had to do. It will also be another chance to keep alive the dream that has driven so many of us to this place and this lawn today. The chance to make a good living, the chance to reach for the brass ring, the chance to achieve the American dream. That is, after all, what we were given and what we clearly owe to the young people here today and to their children. Thank you very much. You got the desk maker here? Thank you.
Probably done Gilman.
Come on, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Congressman Gus Hawkins, who for many years was the chairman of this committee and who retired last year. Bring him up here.
You're good short, you can stand right in front of us. Chairman? I'd rather have Elsie here.
I forget how to spell them in the middle.
But you could use Jefferson too, yeah, that's very. Right on Jefferson.
Give the desk makers one more hand and we're adjourned.